Hey, all good. All right, are we good online? 848? Yes. All right. Hey, good evening, good afternoon. We'll call to order our work session here before our regular July meeting. Welcome all those who are tuned in online or also who are present with us today. Thank you for being here. We're going to we've got an update from Carol Daniel on that will fall under board updates on advocacy groups related to construction. And we're just going to flip because he's delayed. So we'd like to start, Dr. Scott, with Reconnect DPS, our back to school update and discussion. Thank you for being here. We're going to, we've got.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. We'll go ahead and get started. Don, if you could pull the return to school planning partners, that sheet up for me, please. And share that with the group. As we begin this journey back on March 13th, we didn't know where we would be today, but I'm very thankful for the community that we live in and how everybody jumped in to help. If you look at this document, as we open it up, we had our local public health, the Northwest Georgia Health Department, that worked with us on a regular basis. Dr. Taylor, Ashley Deverell, I can't thank them enough for the work that they have done with us. Hamilton Healthcare, Todd and Jeff and the guys over there and ladies, and then the Whitfield Murray COVID Task Force, which actually is Murray County, the mayors, the county commissioners, school superintendents, medical professionals. You know, we've done a weekly call there as we move forward. Our RESA, which is the Northwest Georgia Educational Services, has worked with us, and had opportunity to meet with all 17 school districts within our RESA. We've been able to meet with Mohawk Industries, Whitfield County Schools, as well as us. We've met a few times trying to work together. The Department of Education has worked with us, and then we've had some conference calls with the governor, the state school superintendent, Richard Woods, and then Dr. Toomey from the state that has shared with us on a couple of different conference calls. We've also reached out to our parents and our staff. We had 2,399 parents respond to a survey as we work toward this. And we asked them, you know, in person, hybrid, or virtual. Of course, we had 32% that gave us in person. We had 43% that chose hybrid, and then we had 25% that chose virtual. And that was without a lot of information of what each of those would look like, but just what they thought. We also asked them how comfortable they would be. And we're pretty split on that. So we had 31% that said they would be extremely uncomfortable, and 29% said somewhat uncomfortable. Then we had 21% that said they were somewhat comfortable, and another 10% said extremely comfortable. And of course, we had 9% of the respondents that didn't give an answer, so we're not sure how they felt with that. So we have reached out, tried to get a lot of input as we've come forward. As we presented on the 13th, we have 3 ways that we can do this. We can come back virtually. We can come back in a hybrid model where, you know, we look and we give every parent an opportunity, everybody. I can either go virtually or I can choose to send my child face-to-face, and it's the parent's choice on what they want to do. And then we take the leftover number and divide them up and try to get those in school. So that would be a hybrid model. We talked about that on the 13th. Or we could choose to go face-to-face. We're prepared a calendar that, you know, we can start at about any time. So we just need to have some good discussion tonight and come up with, you know, the opportunities that we think we have to help move our children forward.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Scott, and to the staff. Thank you so much, because I know y'all are working hard on a lot of variety of options that we can consider. As we move into just a general board discussion, just to frame the discussion up, there's probably three major decisions at the board level that we would want to have some kind of consensus around. Those would be whether to issue a mask requirement on Dalton Public School facilities, the start date of school, and then how we return to school in one of the three options or some combination of those three options that Dr. Scott has presented and that we discussed and heard reports on in detail last Monday. I do want to make one comment before we open it up to the board for discussion on any of those 3 points. We are receiving a lot of feedback or questions about how would certain classes work, how would my child be served lunch, how they get to and from classes and things of that nature. I would just emphasize that those are really decisions at the school level. And for parents that have those questions, I would just encourage you to reach out to your school principal or your school administrators, because I think each school could be in a different scenario based on numbers and based on enrollment, physical layout of facilities. So there are some comments which we have received and we appreciate about how would this happen at this school or this school. And I think parents and all of our constituents, those are school level decisions, important ones, and just encourage you to reach out to your principals or your assistant principals for clarity on those issues. So with that being said, we'll open it up to any board comments or ideas about on one of those or in those three areas of consideration for the board and for our meeting later on when we would vote on any decision. Sir.
I thought it was on a minute ago. I'm sorry. I might suggest that we take that into 3 chunks as you've outlined it. And I would start off with mask. Dr. Scott, have you worked with staff and others and have some thoughts for us on that?
Yes, sir. We've had some discussion. We've had discussion about mandating masks pre-K through 12. We've also had discussion. We know that sometimes for pre-K, kindergarten, first and second, that may be a little tough. Maybe mandating masks 3rd grade up. The only time they would be able to take the mask off is if you can sit in a social distancing situation within an instructional unit, so that you can be far enough apart to do that. And that's kind of what we have discussed. So basically, if you're a 6th grader, you're expected to wear a mask on the bus. You're expected to wear one in all transitions. Once you get in the classroom, if you can be social distancing, then we would allow you to remove it at that time. That's what we talked about, because it's a long time. If you talk about arriving at school at 7, not getting out till 2:30, 3 o'clock, that's a long time without any relief.
And what would you consider that distance to be in a typical classroom?
Well, we're trying to make sure that's what is recommended, 6 foot.
Other thoughts on just the mask decision point?
Yeah, I think it should be a mandate. I think it should be for all grades, and then we let that we work back from the mandate. Let the teachers and schools at least that policy, in accordance with the grade. Obviously, the 6th grader or an 8th grader or 12th grader is going to be expected to adhere to that a little more strictly than a 1st grader, 2nd grader. I think we have professionals in the classrooms that will understand those differences. But I believe that if we mandate them, we're going to get more compliance. So I think it should be a mandate. Thank you.
I'm not sure about taking the mask off in the class. It's going to be hard, but we need to educate every student, elementary, 1st, 2nd, 3rd graders. I was someone and they said if you educate the kids, it's important and never keep the mask. My question also is brought up to me. we know kids gonna lose masks between going to school one day and then come back the next day. Do we have ample supply to have kids come back to school the next day?
Right now, Rusty, correct me if I'm wrong, we have about 15,000. We have, so at some point, we have roughly about 15,000 right now. At some point in time during the school year, if they continue to lose them, we are worried that depending on the spread, that they could be difficult to obtain again. But we're at this time, we're around 15,000 masks.
Are they disposable, washable?
Cloth.
Cloth.
Yes, sir.
So are we gonna hold kids accountable for their masks?
Yes, sir. That's what we're going to try to. But then if they show up and then they lose it during the school day, and they come back to a classroom and they've left it somewhere they don't remember, did they leave it in the bathroom or whatever, we may have to go try to find one for them or something. So those will be difficult to kind of handle. Rusty, you're gonna have to use a mic, buddy.
We do have about we do, I'm having all kind of technical difficulties. We do have about 6,000 disposable masks, so we'll have those available at all the schools. And then GEMA is sending us, I think, about 9,000 youth masks that we're waiting on them to arrive, and those will be washable masks as well. So that'll give us close to, 20,000+ masks for our school, provided that shows up. I don't have those yet.
So we would have 2+ per student.
The reason I ask that is because, kids lose clothes, coats, books, glasses, anything that they have, they lose it. So my thing is that, how we gonna hold them responsible for those masks? The main thing is to make sure that they get the education report about it, make sure that we have enough there. And that's one thing people be worried about. These masks, I don't think have enough. 15,000 won't last us a year.
No, so 20,000 won't last us a whole year either.
We need 5 more masks.
Just to make this comment now, I've just gotten 2 text messages from people who are listening who haven't heard anything that anyone has said except for Matt and Dr. Scott. And so we might want to speak up best we can, and I'm sure they're going to respond to this comment now. So just speak up so everybody can hear. Great. So we have one board member just for review, starting with Mr. Sanders, who's said basically keep it simple and require masks in DPS facilities. And then Mr. Johnson has kind of echoed that same sentiment with some questions about the logistics of providing masks and if children lose their masks. Jody, Ms. McClure, you have any comments that you want to share? Okay. Mr. Griffin.
I appreciate both of the comments, Mr. Sanders and Mr. Johnson. I would echo Mr. Sanders' assertion that we have principals in schools for reasons, and principals and their staff to look at individual situations and monitor those situations. And it may be in certain situations the principal says they stay on all the time at this due to the nature of this subject matter or class. But in other situations, if it can be spread out 6 feet or more, and there's no indications of symptoms and so forth, that we exercise some latitude there.
Great. And I think what we can do to keep at the board level this evening, if y'all there's consensus and we have a spot on the agenda to vote on this, we can discuss it more. But really just issue a directive to the superintendent. He can then formulate with his cabinet and his team specific guidelines, exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, it's a broad mandate for masks in DPS facilities. But then we're going to trust teachers, we're going to trust the professionals in this room, and to just make the best decision of with those things when we can't maintain social distancing, et cetera. But at the broad level, that would be the general rule and general guidance that would come from the board. That sound okay to my colleagues? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. All right. The second decision, we said we need to talk about how we come back and also start date. Probably start date does affect how we return. So why don't we start with calendar and start date options? Dr. Scott?
As we begin this discussion, I want to remind everybody that Rusty and Teresa and her group, they've done a great job. We have thermometers. We have face masks for all our staff. We have face shields, clear shields for all our staff. We have hand sanitizer for each classroom. We have hand sanitizing stations throughout all our buildings. We have spray bottles, microfiber towels. We've increased the budget for cleaning. We have a budget amendment tonight to add staff that could help us monitor students as they come in and out of the school building to check temperature and screen as we move forward. We are requesting to add a coronavirus prevention and response coordinator that would help with some of the education as well as some of the tracing that has a medical background that could help with that. We are also in contact with Prevent X, which is a fogging company that could do all our schools in the last 90 days. We've had it vetted with some chemists that they feel is a very good product with some people from industry around our city as we move forward. So those are just a few of the things that we are doing as we move forward to try to help make sure that our kids are safe.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Scott. And again, the work that y'all have done to prepare us for this and think through a lot of things is extraordinary. So the start date of school, which is currently slated and is by August 6th, but I think there has been consensus at the work session that we needed to move that date to the right on the calendar. So just open it up for conversation for any discussion about a start date. I think we've heard everything from after Labor Day to sometime between Labor Day and August the 17th. So we can go from there if anybody would like to start that discussion. I don't mind starting, but you go ahead, Mr. Sanders.
As far as I'm concerned, I wish that given the spread that we're experiencing right now, I think we should push that date as far out as feasible. And like for me, and from what I've heard from others, I think it needs to be after Labor Day. I think that's the first opportunity I think we should talk about having the children in the school. And I know we've not spoken about that. I mean, that wasn't the plan. I think we talked about 17th and 18th, and I appreciate that. But I think that we need to take advantage of that time and wait and see what the numbers are. And so I would say sometime after Labor Day. I hope you're trying to think about that.
All right, thank you, Sam. Any other thoughts, Jody? Well, that would be one item of discussion. Would be Tuesday, September the 8th. That would be the official start of school. Obviously, that's a ripple effect. There'll be some other calendar adjustments that we would need to, or that would be made and we'd vote on later this evening at regular session.
Do you think they could take the week prior to that and give out devices and those sorts of things so that whenever they do start on the 8th, they'd be ready to run?
Well,
Just a thought.
We're going to plan a hybrid and a full return either way. I mean, we could actually, if you wanted to, start on the 31st and actually do the hybrid model and give out devices and do a little training with students that week, and maybe, start the next week or do 2 weeks of that and start on the 14th with everybody. I mean, we could, there's absolutely some different things that we could do to make that work however you guys want it to work.
If we started after Labor Day, when would the teachers have to report? Like, what would be the idea there? When would they start?
Well, if we start after Labor Day, teachers would start either 9 or 10 days before Labor Day, and then school would not finish until around June the 16th or 17th of June.
But we could also lengthen the school day and not get out as late in June, or shorten Thanksgiving. There's some options there. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Johnson, you have it?
I like starting after Labor Day, but also I think that if we did the 30th, and that we can give out the devices and then start on the 8th. But I do like lengthening the days where we wouldn't have to, we can get out before June 16th, 17th, 15 minutes. We can do 15 minutes earlier, later add on, then we wouldn't have to, we'll get out before the 16th, 17th of June.
Now, when you talk about starting the 31st, are you trying to count those as 5 days, as 4 or 5 days, or are we just giving out devices that week? Kind of, I mean, and then we're really starting after Labor Day. I'm just trying to make sure I know what we're saying.
Dr. Scott, Stewart's right over there. It's my understanding that giving out the devices is a different animal than just people driving through and picking them up. You're not just going to hand them to them. The youngster has to sign on it. So it's a 2 or 3 hour procedure. Tell us about it.
So it's not 2 or 3 hours, but it is probably 15 to 20 minutes at minimum, just to make sure that they can sign on, that everything works with their device. The other thing is also we like to be on site so that if there are any kind of connection issues, we know that ahead of time. We can go ahead and swap a device out, those kinds of things. Also, one thing to consider is as we push this back, it would be a good idea if we could extend the school day, because the further back we push the end of school for next year, we have a super strict timeline to get ready for the year after.
Right.
And so typically we end school in May and we have plenty of time to get that done. So that's going to be something to consider.
What if, what if we made the start of school August 31st, did a 2-week hybrid, and we could end, that would be young kids, indoctrination of masks, social distancing, come in hopefully 50% of our a day. And then on September 15th, we gave the full option of 100% traditional, 100% virtual to our parents and our constituents, always with an asterisk that if community conditions are severe or substantial, we can at any time, like we've done for severe weather, we can always go 100% virtual at any time. Y'all are prepared for that, which is amazing. So I don't know if that's a little bit of an incremental approach, but does that kind of get us and get all the things we've talked about with getting kids able to wear a mask, social distance? It gives us time for devices. It brings us back a little bit slow. It maybe helps our calendar on the back end, which is important, as Stuart just relayed. I don't know if that's how that feels, but
And I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. If a family chooses 100% virtual option, they would only come on campus long enough to receive that device, get whatever bit of indoctrination, and then they would not return to campus for whatever period of time, which we've talked about 6 weeks chunk at a time, a 6-week time frame. So that virtual option would be in place by the 6 weeks for the entire year. It's my understanding at this point, the possibility of the entire year. So that would still be there. Then for the 75% that have indicated that they would like to return, then we return them on hybrid the 31st and the week of the 7th, and then move on from there.
Yeah, a parent can choose at any time to go from face-to-face back to virtual. There's no waiting time on that. The only waiting time is if you choose virtual, you can only come back to the classroom every 6 weeks. So if you choose virtual to start with, you can't rejoin the school for 6 weeks. And the reason we do that is once we get everybody's social distance and we get everything going, you can't interrupt that in the middle. We just need certain times where you can come back in. But at any point in time, a parent has the right to come get your child. Absolutely. We're going to get them virtually learning, and we'll do that. But also, we can stop as a district at any time too, based on spread, and go completely different. All right.
Other thoughts? Just to recap, 31st, your idea is 31st, kids in the school.
Spread out.
Hybrid, 2
Hybrid.
weeks. So 50%-ish, depends on enrollment, how many opt for online versus in person.
Okay.
So my son, we'll put out my kid, I won't, I lean, Beth and I lean toward, they both need to be in the classroom. So that'll be our decision as parents. So 31st, they're going to go 2 days a week based on what the principals of schools assign. I'm just suggesting maybe we do that for 2 weeks and then give the 100% in person traditional and 100% online on September the 15th. That gives us hopefully that supports what
Do
I
you mean
help,
the 14th or the Monday?
whatever that Monday
The
is.
14th. Sorry.
Yeah, I wrote it down wrong. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
What does that do to the rest of the calendar?
Don, correct me if I'm wrong, if we run that calendar, now we could play with days within the calendar if you wanted to, like Matt said earlier, we could, take 2 days at Thanksgiving or do something like that, but basically, post-planning's over with, I think it's June the 8th, is that right, Don? Oh, staff is the 9th, so it'd be over with for staff on the 9th, over with for students on the 4th. So if we go 174 days, then it's on the 4th, and then we would have 4 days of post-planning after that. But if you wanted to shorten that, we could look at 2 days at Thanksgiving. I think we have another staff day in there somewhere, one staff day. So we could, look at that a little bit to adjust it if we needed to.
Other thoughts, opinions, insights? So I think there's been basically two broad proposals, the September 8th after Labor Day proposal, which would be more, you come back either 100% traditional or 100% digital online, or the August 31st start date, 2-week hybrid, 50% a day in the buildings with a clean day on Wednesday, September the 14th. You would opt either toward the 100% in-person or 100% virtual, and that's a little more of an incremental approach with the option always to put everybody back virtual based on community conditions with the spread, or hopefully the mitigated spread between now and the start of school. So those are the two options that I think we've discussed or have been presented. There could be others, and if there is a principal or an administrator that wants to share, we always would welcome that at this point in the work session as well. So,
one thing I might add with Stuart, the summer of, what does that become? The summer of 21. We've not worked on a 21-22 calendar yet, and there's nothing written in stone. Obviously, from what we've talked about tonight, we can push that out a week and make adjustments in that calendar and provide flex time during the summer.
all right. So I'll just go around with the board and you can share where you are right now. And we do have another opportunity before we vote to discuss this in regular session. I'll start with you, Mr. Sanders. Or you want me to start with Jody?
Ladies first.
All right. No, I was going to let her go last. No, go ahead, Sam, if you don't mind. I'll go first. It doesn't matter.
No, it's fine. I can get behind either one of those. I'm an after Labor Day lean, but
All right.
but that's but I'm not real strong on that. And I'll go along. I think the idea is pushing it as far as we can push it. Just to look at this spread, and the 31st we're pushing it a good bit that day. So I can get behind that, because even then we're not stuck. We're not packing school in earnest at that point. We're still talking about a hybrid model. So I can get behind that. But I'm leaning after Labor Day. But either way, it's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, Tully.
I can go with the 31st. That sounds great. And then the 2-week hybrid.
Yes, sir. Okay, Mr. Griffin.
I'm good with the 31st, and for folks that are counting, that's pushing it out 17 days from what our original calendar that we approved back in whatever year that was, we
Right.
approved it.
And we are coming back gradually under that proposal. Jody, Ms. McClure?
I mean, I can get behind the 31st. My concerns are what it does to the rest of the calendar. So,
Okay.
but I can do the 31st.
So Dr. Scott, just from the educational standpoint that y'all have to execute, I mean, we make the decision, but y'all got to cash the check that we're writing here, so to speak. Can you just give your thoughts on, how that affects your team and what y'all are thinking about if we sort of are leaning on that 31st versus the 8th?
I think if we think about the 31st, as you said, Matt, it gives us a chance to, 2 weeks to kind of ease in and see exactly where we're at. It also gives some of our parents an option in a smaller environment if they want to choose face-to-face. Say, hey, let me look at this for 2 weeks before before they're all back in there and kind of see how that works. Because at any time they can pull them out. So it gives them that option that, hey, I'll put my child in a little smaller environment, so they can social distance, and let's see how it works. And if I feel comfortable, we can continue on. If I don't feel comfortable, I can pull them out. So it gives us a little bit there. It also gives, by pushing back to the 31st, as we send the form out, we have a form that will go out tomorrow requesting that all parents let us know if you'd like to go totally virtual or if you'd like to do some, face-to-face. And then by pushing back as far as we have, instead of allowing a week, maybe we could give them 10 days to 2 weeks to get that form filled out, and then still give us a little time to plan that as we move forward. Because there's a lot of things that we're trying to do this week, such as an admin retreat on Wednesday and Thursday to share the plan, and then faculty meetings next week with every school to share with faculty, and then also with our new teacher orientation next week as well. So I think that puts us in a good situation versus the 8th, and we just go the 8th. We're still getting ready, no matter hybrid and full-fledged. And so, I think it's a good choice.
Okay, anybody else in the room, principals, anybody, administrators, cabinet, want to share your thoughts? Again, we're all looking for what might be the most reasonable, best, flexible, safest, but also serve our kids and educate our future. Anybody want to share? Be happy. Yeah, thank Ms. Orr, our content engagement. Love to hear from your perspective.
I see all sides of this story, and I know that this is a very difficult position, and it's a moving target for all of us. I do want us to consider that every week we push back instruction, it's going to be delayed even a little bit more because we have a lot of front loading to do this year to prepare our kids for the type of instruction we're going to be doing, whether we are face-to-face, all virtual, or a hybrid. So the August 31st with a hybrid for a couple of weeks is very palatable in terms of us having that time to get devices out, get children into the Canvas courses, which look much different than the spring, and prepare them for the safety measures that they will have to be observing in the schools, doing the training with the children. I mean, we're just going to have to train them how we're going to walk in the halls, how we're going to sit in the classroom, that we're not going to be using some common pieces of equipment that we're accustomed to doing, that I'm probably going to have my own space and I'm going to have to try to stay in my space a lot. So there's, at high school, how are we going to do transitions between classes, and where I'm going to be walking one way, and all of those pieces. We also want to do some social emotional work right up front. And so those 2 weeks would give us, because we have 2 days with each student twice. And so that would give us time to do some social emotional work and then just prepare them to really be able to hit the ground running if with face-to-face, if that's the way we are able to go back then after Labor Day. But or 14. Because, you know, the first of the school year, the first couple of days, 2 or 3 days, you got to get settled in. So, and we haven't seen them since March. And so if we delay really doing anything until after Labor Day, we cannot think that core instruction we're going to hit the ground running that first day. But that's my 2 cents.
I just have a question. If, and I've gotten this, people are asking this question, will the virtual work week be 5 days or 4 days with catch up? And 5 days. Okay.
For teachers, for, what are you asking?
Well, I mean, like if
Students.
yeah.
All right, so it's 5 days a week virtual learning.
Not 4 days.
And then we do need to emphasize it's structured, it's different than it looked in the spring,
All right.
but we'll let Ms. Orr address that.
Yeah, Laura has also, her and her team have put together of what a hybrid or what virtual looks like. I'll let her they'll be pushing out.
So really the idea of the 5th day of the week is for cleaning of buildings for the hybrid model. But instruction will continue on those days. It would be all virtual, but it also would, if we're on a hybrid, if we've had to stay on a hybrid, who knows, we don't know, it would give a chance for all students within a classroom who are being served by the same teacher to come together in Zoom meetings, and so that they would have their peer group, get to see the other kids who are assigned to their classroom. But there will be work that goes on those days. Now that will look different depending on the grade span. But let me give you an example just because I've worked the most on this. Our other team members from the content engagement have taken the lead with high school and middle school. But for elementary, we're going to have a big focus. If it's a hybrid model for a couple of weeks or however long, we'll have a big focus on ELA and math on the in-person days. We will do front loading for their content that will be coming up for them virtually. Okay, now we've also got the part about intervention for kids who may need some extra support. But we would do front loading and preparing them for the concepts that they would be encountering that would be coming up digital in their virtual learning. So then on Wednesday, right now for elementary, what we are envisioning is that would be a time for social studies and science focus, and then other work that we might need to do with kids. It might be that we are shoring up some, and that would be that's where teachers would have some discretion on that day. They might bring the whole class together for an activity. We would do some social studies and science. We might have some other activities that they would do as a class. If the other grade spans, those Wednesdays might look a little different, but there will be teaching going on and teachers will be seeing students. They might even be pulling students for some one-to-one tutoring or intervention or a small guided reading group that they need to do. All kinds of pieces.
All right, thank you. And so just for the board's sake, so we'll discuss this again. We're not voting yet. We can't. We'll vote in our regular meeting. But right now, it seems we have some consensus and have gotten good input that we would start the school year for this year on August the 31st in a hybrid model. 50% a day would come into our buildings. Wednesday would be a clean day. And on September the 14th, we would at that point execute parent options to either 100% online, which they can choose at any time, or 100% traditional in-person instruction. That's the summary, with always the option to return to 100% as community conditions change or warrant.
Question, if a family, Dr. Scott, Mr. Evans, know that they want to go 100% virtual, they won't be required to come in the building physically during those 2 weeks, except to get their device.
No, so they would just need to get their device. And then we'll have to have some discussion with only having 2 weeks. those that choose virtual may need to wait that full 6 weeks before we get them back in full. So we can make sure we plan for that. We can look at everything. So if you choose virtual, you're choosing it for a 6-week period, and then you come back. If you choose face-to-face, you can always pull out and go virtual anytime.
What's the date that they'll need to make the election? Like, what are we talking about?
Initially, to
initial-
start the
initial
school,
election.
but that's going out tomorrow, start
Okay.
choosing.
All right.
The only concern I would have about tomorrow is community conditions hopefully will change between now and mid-August. So there may need to be some flexibility because a parent today may be reticent to have their child enrolled 100% instruction, but mid-August, hopefully if we see community mitigation, maybe they would choose differently. There may need to be some, y'all could just look at that. Yeah. Okay.
Where'd Laura go? Hey, quick question. If you choose full-time in-person and you have to quarantine, will the online and in-person coincide all the time so you can jump out, do online for your 14 days and jump right back in?
That's, that theoretically, yes. That is why this front loading and having time with kids to really build their capacity about how these Canvas courses are going to work and build the teacher capacity. Having extra pre-planning days is going to be fantastic. One of the things that we have that really is a given this year, it's just going to be the way it is. We want teachers to have flexibility because they do have to respond to their students. But we are going to have to be on a strict pacing schedule. And the Canvas courses will help us with that because of that very reason. The students have to drop out. So the work that we have built in the Canvas courses will be important, whether we're all face-to-face, whether we're all online, or whether we're a hybrid. That will be the core of our work.
On the subject of content, what about dual language immersion? I know that's a broad question, but.
Yeah, no, we've already, we have been working on that already. In fact, those folks are meeting tomorrow. And Jennifer takes the lead with our dual language classes. We have already, Claire Kaiser from Brookwood is kind of taking the lead with being a lead thinker with that cohort of teachers. And they've already met with her. We have some ideas about how to make that work. Just parallel to the Canvas courses, but they're coming in tomorrow to really do some work and thinking about. And Nick is going to be with them from the instructional technology point of view. Jennifer will be with them from the curriculum point of view.
Jody, I just want to, and correct me if I'm wrong, if they choose totally virtual, it's going to be just as important that they stay paced with what the regular class is doing, because 6 weeks or 12 weeks down the road, if they choose to return to the classroom, then all of a sudden they need to be in the same place that the class is. Is that correct?
All right. And then I would just, again, emphasize that for parents who are watching or guardians who are watching, you may have specific questions about your student's schedule or class. And again, that's going to have to be worked out by the building level leaders, the classroom, the teachers, and the principals, and they'll be ready to answer those questions. But from the board's perspective, it looks like we're going to move with an August 31st start date, 2-week hybrid. September 14th would execute an option of 100% in person or 100% online and move forward from there. Let's, Dawn, you may need to come up now and get a microphone, because I do think we need to discuss the calendar impact of a start date of the 31st, and because we do have to vote on the calendar as well. And so there is a ripple effect to start date on the 31st. And we've talked about lengthening the school day. We've talked about getting out in various dates in June. We've talked about shortening Thanksgiving break from a week to 3 days, or 5 days to 3 days. So if you could just overview some of the impacts and decision points that the board might have to consider with an August 31st start date.
With an August 31st start date, we have 2 calendars already in eBoard that you could look at it we can look at. And the only difference is how many student days you have. Both of these calendars start on August 31st. Both of these calendars have 5 days for Thanksgiving holiday. They have one staff development day during the year, being the days that we return from Christmas holiday. It's felt that that's critical that staff have at least that one day during the year to try to catch up on things. The ending of the year will depend on how many student days you want and or if you want to add days, minutes to the school day. With 172 student days, we would meet the state requirement for numbers of minutes during the year. With our current bell schedule. Yes.
And so
Now, the
170.
exception is Morris does not, Morris is a little, it's 80 minutes off for the entire year, but they've been off for a long time. In a positive way. They've been doing things that meet the needs of kids and doing some unique things. I
Absolutely.
want to correct the way that came out.
So
Okay.
what are the options, Don, of 172 versus 174?
If you go 172 student days, students would end on Wednesday, May 2nd, June 2nd, thank you. Wednesday, June 2nd, and staff could have 5 days post-planning to wrap up, because grade's going to be different this time when you have some online things, some non-online things, plus preparing things for the move to the next year. That would give them 10 days at the beginning of the year, one day mid-year, and 5 at the end. So staff would end on June 9th. That's 172 student days, 16 staff days. And with our existing bell schedule, that does get us enough minutes to meet the state requirement. Now, we're exempt from that anyway,
Sure.
but we want to
Strategically.
continue meeting that.
All
Now, you could go through Friday.
That would be
June.
174 days.
Yes. If you went students through Friday, June 4th, then staff would have 3 post-planning days, and you'd have 174 student days and 14 staff days. Now, that's still having an entire week at Thanksgiving.
We can shorten Thanksgiving.
There's really, and there's the only thing else during the calendar year would be Labor Day itself.
Yeah.
President's Day itself, the 5 days for spring break. Luckily, Good Friday falls in that. MLK, the actual holidays itself. There are no long extended weekends with this calendar.
Right.
With a holiday on Monday and a Friday off. That
Okay.
will not be in this calendar at all.
So just to summarize, the 2 options Ms. Ramnett has presented are 172 student days, which meet state requirements. School will get out June 2nd, 174 days. School would get out June the 4th with a 5-day Thanksgiving. The options we have also to change any of that or to get out earlier, either the 172 or 174 option would be to adjust Thanksgiving from 5 days to 3 days. And we'll open that up now to any board discussion.
What does that do to midterms? Does that break you? So finals and things would be after Christmas? Any calendar?
I took mine after Christmas when I went to Dalton High. It's been done before. This is where we are.
Now, any calendar that starts after the first week of August, you would not have semester break at Christmas. It simply is not possible. Unless you eliminate Thanksgiving completely, go on 5 days.
All right, who would like to just start the conversation? Or does Dr. Scott, you want to weigh in and give your recommendation?
And really, when you look at these, what you're talking about is, do we want to give our teachers 5 post-planning days to pack and move? Or do we want to go 174 days and they get the 3 days to pack and move with the upcoming year? And as Palmer said earlier, we can also adjust next year's calendar to push it back a little bit to give us a little more time in the summer as well and do the 174 days. It's just kind of whatever you feel like. And I think it's good either way.
Thank you, Dr. Scott.
Do we have to vote on this tonight? Or can we've got to call meetings the whole first week of August to really look at some fine details.
I think the start date, which we haven't voted on it yet, but I think the start date's the most important thing.
I hate to get the rush on this, but
Do you see an elephant right now, Mr. Griffin, that I don't see?
I think we're doing a little bit. Because I think we need to sit back and there may be this year some wisdom in having a shorter Thanksgiving break because COVID's going to carry on for however long and youngsters, families having the opportunity to get out and away further and maybe getting into some hotbed situations. Don't want to tinker with Christmas, but I'm just one young voice.
Nice.
It's a toss-up. This is a toss-up for me. I'm fine with either one. So
Meaning 172, 174, or waiting or
and I'm
voting?
fine to just delay it, that part too. Any of that's fine.
All right. Johnson?
Yeah, I'm echo what he said. I don't want to rush to miss something.
Okay.
Just wait and see what we cover.
All right. Good. We'll do that. We'll just vote. If we can amend that recommendation, we'll vote on an August 31st start date coming back, as we've already previously discussed. Mr. Ramon, if you could just have e-board reflect that with the hybrid 2 weeks and the September 14th, 100%, and we'll put the full calendar. We'll just put that work to get that on the agenda for August the 10th, which is not that far away, unless we need to wait because of other circumstances that we come up with. Thank you. While we're on coronavirus, let's go ahead, Dr. Scott, and you can talk about, you've already mentioned it, but the hiring of the coronavirus prevention and response coordinator, and that would be agenda item 4. Then we'll come back to board advocacy with Mr. Griffin and Carol Daniel.
Yes, sir. We have found that when you have to trace someone, whether it be a student athlete that came down with the virus or whatever it may be, a teacher, if that happens during the school year, the tracing then becomes
Gracias a todas las personas por seguir esta transmisión. Por favor, les dejaremos el link para que estén más informados de la reunión completa. Muchísimas gracias y recuerden compartir el video. Gracias.